Thank you so much for joining today. We have our social listening team here to talk to you guys. And we have Ann Erickson, our analytics manager, Sydney Smith, senior analyst, and Suzanne Hansen, analyst. I will pass it right on over to you, Ann.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for that intro, Lauren. And thanks, everybody, for joining us. We're really excited to share with you today some of the joys and wonders of social listening. And I just want to remind everyone to, remember you're all getting a complimentary analysis. So be on the lookout from the next couple of days that we're going to be in contact. So, we'll be talking to you soon. Right off the bat, we like to define what is social listening. And we generally define social listening as listening to and deriving insights from conversations occurring online. And so this can be anywhere from Twitter to Instagram to Facebook, Tumblr, Pinterest, TikTok, Reddit, you name it. If it's publicly available online, we can find those conversations and incorporate them into social listening. What's unique about social listening is that it can be unbiased. You can get a lot more data. You can get it very quickly, and it can be gotten generally less expensively than other research methods like a focus group or a survey. It's also really detailed and nuanced, and we can get into very niche parts of the internet and communities that may otherwise be closed off or less likely to discuss some of these things openly in other circumstances. We also want to draw a line between social monitoring, which is something that probably a lot of you are already doing, which is great. It's important. It's an important starting place, and that is defined as observing and interacting with your own social channels. So your own Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, right? Making sure, that your content is being interacted with, doing some maybe customer service through DMs and so forth. But social listening, can comprise quite a bit more data, more different kinds of data, and way more different kinds of interaction. So organic mentions are things that are happening outside of your company or brand owned content. This is going to be, outside of what's in your control, and may not mention your brand. It could mention your products. It could mention an executive. It could have a lot of different aspects to it, but it's occurring outside of something that's in your control. Competitor mentions. So what's being said on their own channels? How are those mentions being contextualized? What are the co-mentions between your brand and your competitor's brand? Those are easily captured through social listening, as well as things that are being discussed in the broader market or the overall industry. What sort of trends or events that are being discussed in your market, in your industry. So that's sort of the difference between those two. And it's very important. Social monitoring is great, but social listening offers just a greater depth of understanding of what's being discussed, a more holistic view of your brand and your products and your audience. Going into a bit about methods here. All of our studies start with business questions from your team. What are the needs that you have? What questions do you have about your audience or your products or how they're being discussed? This helps us shape the way that we go and collect the data. So we generally are using keywords and high-level concept modeling. And this means that we're just putting together the keywords in such a way that pulls in the relevant data. You don't need to know, every single time somebody says a word that may be in your brand that could be pretty generic. You need to know when they're actually talking about your brand. So we try and filter out as much noise as we possibly can while we're importing the data. And then that allows us to categorize, and we can really customize categorization, down to a very granular degree. um, Sentiment, content, overall topics. Author type is a hugely popular category that we often do by hand. If we're talking about a pharma example, we have patients, we have doctors, we have caregivers. There's a lot of different ways that we can categorize this data in order to create meaning and bring the story forward. What do you need to know? What does this data actually mean? And this is where we bring in, our expertise and our, delivering these insights that circle back to your business questions. We're going to answer those, and we're probably going to provide some insights that you didn't expect, or may illuminate something that was just really deep and down low. We deliver these insights in a couple of different formats. Our most popular is our market research report. So this is going to be our qualitative and quantitative research, and we can, provide lots of custom formatting, making sure that everything comes out right, and that we can do this on any sort of cadence, really, anywhere from weekly to annually. We have a lot of monthly engagements and quarterly engagements, um, benchmark reports that then, morph into, tracking. So there's a lot of different ways that we can go about, putting together these reports. We also can provide live dashboards, and this is also a very popular option. We curate the dashboards, so we set them up and make sure that they're answering your business questions. We also clean the data so that it is relevant and useful for you, and it doesn't have all that junk in there, and we make sure that it's, nice and clean. We also provide training for anyone who wants to use these dashboards, and they're accessible 24/7, and they update live. So you have a really unique view into what's being said, and who's saying it, and it can be customized to meet your needs. Something else that we offer is real-time monitoring, and this is a pretty special option. We can monitor up to 24/7. Our expert teams have a 5-minute average delivery time from when something gets posted on the internet to when we can deliver it to key stakeholders within your organization. Um, we can do that over Slack or Teams or email or SMS messages, or we can call you up on the phone. Very flexible there. Moving on, our team has a ton of experience. We have been doing this for a very long time. We have a combined 3 decades of experience on, we've been doing this for a while. Personally, I've been doing this since 2011. And it's we have a very, very deep knowledge of the way people interact online, and what it means for brand and strategy. We also are pretty proud of our sociolinguistic focus. Um, what we do is we analyze the way people talk and the way that they discuss things. And this just happens to be online, but you have to be really good with language and understand how it evolves and grows. And that's something that we pay a lot of attention to. Robust data collection, it's not just about the amount of data you get, it's about the quality of the data that you get. So, we are constantly looking at best in class tools, reevaluating how, what we use, and how our methods could be changed or grown or adapted to meet, growing and changing needs of our client base. And we can also customize anything to meet any need. We're very, very flexible. It's not unusual for us to be delivering reports under somebody else's logo, using a customer's PowerPoint template and so forth. This is something we're very, very used to doing, because it really needs to be what meets your needs as the client. We also have, industry experience in a lot of different verticals. We've worked with a lot of different sorts of companies over the years. Some of our favorite clients, we've had them for more than 10 years at a time. So, we develop these deep and lasting relationships with our clients, and we really want to, we like to hold on to them. And I like to think that's because we are so adaptable and we do grow and change with our clientele. Our use cases are wide and varied. Um, there's a lot of different ways that you can utilize this sort of research. Um, Testing hypotheses from your focus group, um, using the authentic consumer language. How are people discussing your products? How can you echo that language back to them with marketing? Brand advocates or partnerships, those are huge places of risk for brands going forward. You want to make sure that the influencers you're working with are a good fit. And we actually have a use case, a case study coming up where we talk about one that wasn't such a great fit. But right now I'm going to dive into a case study about uh, employees. Employees are the first brand ambassadors that your customers are going to meet, and sometimes they're going to be in the field and you're not always going to be able to supervise them to the best of your ability. This is a real-time instance where we identified two field technicians for a company, a client, who they were urinating on customer property. Identifying this incident early and making sure that the client was aware allowed them to comp service for these particular customers, and they took the videos down. A client was able to refamiliarize their technicians on how to appropriately take care of this while on the job, and a potentially embarrassing viral event was avoided because of early identification and taking, using social media and social monitoring as a way to, um, you know, supervise employees from afar. With that, I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Susan, who's going to give us the lowdown on some football.
All right. Yes. So this case study explores events which could have resulted in negative brand sentiment for a particular team. Specifically, we're looking at a large Midwest sports franchise that over the past few years had been in the news for a specific player who was contemplating retirement. And then most recently, there was speculations that he wanted to be traded after he came out of a darkness retreat. And this all came after an amazing run that this team made towards the playoffs. At one point in the season, they only had a 4% projection of making the playoffs, but then they ended up winning the rest of their games until the last week of the regular season, where they just needed to beat Team B to punch their ticket to get into the playoffs. Unfortunately, they didn't do that. So then that ended their run for the season. So then we're just taking a look here at the data, though. So after analyzing the data, we discovered that fans were actually more excited and active on social media with all of the excitement over the playoff run that Team A had than they were over the trade conversation and speculations with one of the players from Team A. And then they also were much more active as well for the draft conversation than they were, again, over the trade actually occurring. So, this shows that, this didn't damage any of the perceptions that the fans had of the team or any of their loyalty that they had.
Yeah, that was an important example of how social listening could help make a decision in this situation as well. Understanding that nobody really cares if you trade that player. They just really want to, they still love the game, they still love the sport, they still love the team.
Yeah, they're much more loyal to the team than they are to a specific player, and this really helps display that.
Next, we're going to follow up with Sydney over here, and we're going to talk about allergies. If I can get, there we go.
So one of the important things that we can do is identify some barriers to use. So a lot of times when you're thinking about marketing your brand, you're thinking about ways to push the product, but it's also important to focus on some of these barriers to use, things that are holding people back from purchasing a product. So we had a popular allergy brand reach out. They wanted to understand the triggers and barriers for consumers who were using their product as a sleep aid. So we did a qualitative analysis of consumer attitudes towards this brand, some of the hesitations that they had. We uncovered 3 different potential barriers. There was a rumor being spread that this particular medication causes dementia over the long term, which was, causing a lot of fear in potential consumers. Then we also identified in our female population of users that mothers were concerned about taking this medication at night to go to sleep. They were worried that their babies wouldn't be loud enough to wake them up with the medicated sleep. And then they were also worried that they would be feeding their babies basically with laced breast milk with this drug. So concerns there. And then our biggest concern that we identified were sleep disturbances. So users that were taking a higher dose of this medication were experiencing things like night terrors, sleep paralysis, even hallucinations in some cases. They were reporting these things online, particularly in forum settings, and having deep conversations about their experiences. And then in turn, when potential users were reading this, they were steering clear of that product because of the potential side effects, even though this was only in users who were using high doses of the medication. So by identifying these, we were able to recommend that the brand push out some educational materials, particularly directed at addressing these barriers.
Yeah. And let's roll right into beer, something a little different.
Yes. So more recently, a popular beer brand had launched an ad campaign that caused online conversation of their product to skyrocket. You could see after the launch there, that dotted line in the middle of the line graph, the conversation really soared. And so the consumer wanted, or the brand wanted to know, are consumers happy with this ad? What are they talking about? What's really driving the sentiment here in terms of the increasing conversation? So we did a sentiment analysis before the ad launch, that month prior to the ad being launched. We found that 65% of all users were talking positively about this brand. And then after the ad was launched, there was a massive shift in sentiment, and 70% of all conversation was negative towards the brand. And it looks like this sentiment shift was driven by the misalignment of political and ideological beliefs between most of the consumers of the brand, their primary consumer base, and the beliefs that were being demonstrated in the ad that was launched.
This is a really good example of something that they should have looked at prior to launching that campaign. Mm-hmm. Had they done a survey of the political and ideological beliefs of their audience prior to this, they probably would have had less negative sentiment shift as a result of the ad campaign.
Yeah, this also highlights another thing that we can do, which is our influencer identification too. Yeah. So, we can dive into some of these top voices that are talking about particular brands or maybe adjacent topics to a particular brand, and provide an analysis on who potential influencers could push your brand in a positive way.
Yeah, it's true. And now for something that everybody loves, which is donuts and coffee. So this analysis was performed at the end of summer when we are all anticipating and excited for those fall flavors coming up. And like many people, we anticipated that the biggest draw, or what people were most looking forward to, was going to be obviously pumpkin spice. And our hypothesis completely confounded when we discovered that for all big 3 coffee donut chains, most consumers were anticipating apple cider for both beverages and baked goods. So, you know, that was a really surprising takeaway. You know, making an assumption about the attitudes that your consumers have, and then actually looking into their attitudes and understanding, well, no, you know, maybe we could do something novel, and instead of pushing the pumpkin spices hard, maybe we buck the trend and, you know, go full tilt boogie into apple cider promotion. So that's, you know, those are some things, those are some questions that we can answer, and those are some of the questions that we get from our consumers. You know, are we targeting the right flavors? Are we targeting the right audience? How do we tell, and how can we look for that stuff? So, you know, this is just, you know, another example of how you know, your audience may surprise you. And that's pretty much it for all of our prepared slides. We do have a couple of questions that came in, it looks like. I have one in the Q&A bubble that says, what are some examples on how real-time monitoring can be used? And I'm really glad that this was asked. You know, we focus on our market research quite a lot, but real time is a really unique product, and it's really focused on essentially risk and threat protection. It's you know, reacting to events that may come up. So, you know, the technician, you know, was a really good example of employee oversight. We set up pre-existing categories of things that we look at, and employees was one of them. And so we were, you know, already tuned into something that may be, you know, this is something that could go wrong, right? Similarly, we look at, you know, executives or product failures. We were doing real-time listening for a large bakery conglomeration for a long time, and they did. You know, they wanted to know about contaminants, so we would report, you know, okay, so and so found a staple in their bagel, and we would send that to them. Or if there was a widespread contamination or a packaging failure. So it ended up being sort of reactive, but, you know, it got to the point where, you know, we could send this particular alert to this particular team, and they would be able to deal with it immediately. There was a period of time where there was a lot of protests happening against a particular client, and we were, you know, it's very easy to plan a lot of these events online, and so we would get wind of these events and let security know, and it meant that they were prepared, you know, to encounter protesters or demonstrators on their campus. Safety events as well. You know, we've had instances where we've, you know, posts where somebody found a gun on campus, or you know, somebody was. It's hard to do this without being specific, but there's a lot of different applications for real time, and it doesn't have to be 24/7. You know, we can do 16 hours a day as well. We can do 12 hours a day. It's highly variable. Sydney, are you looking at these other questions coming in? Can you read them out to me?
Yeah. It looks like we got one that says, are you exclusively focused on social media platforms, or do you also offer services focused on other online platforms such as reseller sites and online stores like Amazon? Yes, we do. That's a great question. We do, you know, a lot of the conversation is occurring on social media. So that's why that's kind of the thing that we kept saying over and over. But our tools do capture reviews. So Yelp, Amazon, all those good things. Basically anything that you can post online, that is not password protected, we have access to that.
And if there's a specific site you want us to be looking for that may not come up, you know, that's not, you know, it's particularly rare, or, you know, isn't indexed by Google, you know, very quickly, you know, we can provide that to our vendors and make sure that they are crawling those sites. That's something that we can do custom as well.
It looks like someone wants to know if we provide collected raw data in the format of an Excel file.
Okay. The answer to that is no. And the reason for that is is actually really nuanced and important. We abide by certain privacy laws, both in the European Union as well as specifically California in the US. So we are CCPA and GDPR compliant. So releasing data like this could be traced back to individuals. So something like a screen name or a profile picture, or a even sometimes some verbatims can be, you can plop that into Google and get back to an individual person. And so therefore it's considered personally identifiable information, which is protected. And so we do not provide any of that. We blind it, and in fact, we don't store any of it, and we don't transmit any of it in order to, be compliant. And we use technology vendors who are all compliant as well. So, it's very important because we deal with some very sensitive information. We have a lot of pharmaceutical clients, and you can imagine that data is pretty sensitive as well. And technically, while all of this is public data, it still is important to protect those individuals.
Mm-hmm. Let's see. Has Verinext looked into publishing any social listening data in academic journals? And how could this be utilized for academics?
That's a great question. We haven't done it yet, but I think it would be a really good complement to existing. We don't have to be on the urine slide anymore. It could be a really good complement to other data maybe used in the academic journal or the particular study. Personally, I have a graduate degree, and I used social data in my thesis as well. So it's it's doable, and I think it's relevant, and it's definitely something that I think could be explored. That sounds like a really interesting question. Yeah.
Let's see. Can these analysis be used in conjunction with support/call center environments? Great question.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we do that all the time, actually. So one of our longest term clients regularly use it. We do call center analysis for them all the time. So, and we can layer in any kind of data that you have. In the past, we have layered in and analyzed call center data. We've layered in and analyzed sales data, survey data. So if you have that data and you want us to analyze it alongside the social data, we can look for, commonalities and, and that sort of thing. See if these things track together. Like that would be very, very common. And it's we have done it. We love doing it. It's an exciting opportunity. Yes.
As a follow-up to the raw data question, is there an option for data that is scrubbed of identifiers? I think this would be a case where our dashboard access would kind of come in handy. So that is where we get all of our data, is in these dashboards. And essentially what we would do is create a personalized dashboard for your team to be able to access. So you can log in with your own username and access the data in this online secure setting, as opposed to us transmitting a file to you directly. That is our last question for now. Are there any other questions that we wanted to get to before we close out?
It looks like part of one question wasn't read yet. Can social listening be used to look at the content on social media regarding medical diagnosis, misinformation, accurate information dissemination, and patient sentiments, etc.?
Yeah, great catch, Susan. So we are actually working on a blog post right now on social listening and misinformation. So we're hoping to get that out very soon, something to keep an eye out for. But yes, we can highlight misinformation in social data. We can also, patient sentiment is definitely something that we can look at. As shown in our sentiment analysis for the beer example. We can pretty much do that kind of analysis for any type of brand in any situation.
I think it's worth noting in this allergy example is that the dementia situation was misinformation. So it was a rumor, excuse me, that was being pushed by who knows where that originated. We had this is for a separate bakery example, but they had a recall because of a contaminant, and several months later, we started seeing posts about another recall for that same client, and we knew for a fact there hadn't been another recall because there was certain steps you have to go through. There's a whole FDA process, and we started to trace it down where it could come from, and it turns out it was a misinformation blog that was targeting a lot of other brands in a very similar fashion, and it was a deliberate maneuver. They were getting ad revenue, so the more clicks they drove to their blogs, they were making money off of the misinformation. So we were able to actually get Facebook, in conjunction with this brand, get Facebook to deactivate their pages because they were being used fraudulently. And so that was a really good example of, okay, this is misinformation. This is clearly not this is not what should be doing. And they had to release a sort of disclaimer saying, we're not having another recall. We're, being very, preventive. Don't worry about it. Yeah. So yeah, misinformation is a really important, it's an important thing to address, particularly on the internet these days, because you never know. Yeah.
So I think we are out of time for questions.
Yeah.
We will be following up after we hang up today.
Yep. So yeah, we will be in touch. We're going to follow up. You're all entitled to a complimentary analysis. We are looking forward to, maybe addressing any additional questions you may have. And somebody's asking if we can provide the presentation. Yeah, I don't see why not. We can make that happen, I think. Everything here is anonymous and safe. So, but we are going to reach out and we will, we'll be in touch. Thank you so much for your time. I hope everybody has a great afternoon. And if we don't speak to you in the next couple of days, have a great holiday as well.